Sonic Adventure 2 is my favorite game of all time. It's the game that really made me love playing video games. I don't think I would be as much as a Sonic fan without this game, and I probably wouldn't be here on YouTube to make content either. Sonic Adventure 2 has that story, visual flair and style, and the gameplay of course. And this is my favorite iteration of Sonic the Hedgehog. And because of all of those things, this makes Sonic Adventure 2 my favorite. But now that we're in the year 2021, I can start to see its age showing in different ways than most people probably think. The game is now 20 years old. Yeah, you heard me right, 20 years old. To a lot of people, it feels like 20 years ago we just had the 2D classic games. Well, now it's the adventure era's turn. With that said, I wouldn't mind some nostalgia pandering towards adventure for once. It would at least be a nice change of pace from the classic games getting nostalgia pandering to us. But yes, Sonic Adventure 2 is not aging amazingly, but that's okay. I still love the game, flaws and all. But hey, at least I think it's aged better than Adventure 1 in terms of animation and presentation. Today, we're going to discuss how Sonic Adventure 2 has not aged that well, but still continues to triumph from being one of the best Sonic games of all time. But before we hop into all the details, let's discuss the criteria of what makes a game age well or age bad, especially from this time period. What does it mean to age well? I think for a game to age well, it has to stand the test of time and still work in the modern day. In the late 90s and early 2000s, we had a plethora of 3D platformers, from Crash Bandicoot, Ratchet & Clank, Jak and Daxter, Spyro, Sly Cooper, and many others. A lot of these games, I think they have aged pretty well. We even received remakes of a lot of these games. A lot of them feel like the same game you remember with a fresh coat of paint and a few changes and additions here and there. Even some of the animations will be faithful to the original game. I think some of these remakes show us that aspects of the original game were just ahead of their time. Some of these games that haven't received remakes still hold up. For example, let's look at Jak and Daxter. This game actually released the same year that Sonic Adventure 2 did. Jak and Daxter has, in my opinion, aged a lot better than Sonic Adventure 2, especially in terms of animation and look. The cartoony animation for this game still fits great and doesn't take away from the tone of the game as well. I don't think Jak and Daxter has that dark of a tone, but the two games afterwards have a bit darker of a tone and they keep that same animation style and it still holds up. Sonic Adventure 2 uses a lot of motion capture, and that is something I don't think looks great on these cartoony hedgehogs, and it doesn't stand the test of time. That's an example of something not aging well in a game, and this ideology will be applied to everything in this video. Sonic Adventure 2 will fail in many areas, but it will also pass in many areas. But now let's talk about what I think matters the most for any Sonic game. The gameplay, of course. Sonic Adventure 2 has phenomenal gameplay, for the most part, but we'll get into that later. Starting off with the speed stages, we're going to dive into the things I really like and think hold up. The movement and the amount of control you have in these stages are nothing but amazing. It has been so long since we had this much control in a Sonic game. 3 out of 4 of the boost games are great, but the control is significantly snatched away from the player compared to Adventure 1 and 2. And then we have Sonic Lost World, which I think is a unique case, but it isn't exactly the same as Adventure and nor has the same feel. I think the control is one of the best things about this Adventure era of Sonic. It also felt more like a platformer back then, not bashing Unleashed colors or generations by any means. I like them for very different reasons, and maybe in a few years we'll discuss how they aged. Another major thing about the game is how the upgrades give new abilities to Sonic. Sonic can gain the ability to bounce, which is one of the best abilities Sonic has ever had in my opinion. It is extremely fun to use and it's a neat showcase of the physics. You also get some strange abilities like the ability to shrink enemies and turn them into like miniature toys. Yeah, it's weird, but it's funny. These upgrades also change the appearances of the characters in Adventure 2, making their designs just look even cooler to me. Showing what you earn from playing a game visually always feels nice and rewarding to be all decked out in the end. Kinda reminds me of Ratchet & Clank. Sonic and Shadow's sense of speed they have is also something I very much enjoy. It may not be blazing fast like the boost games, but it's fast enough where you can control it in a fully 3D environment. I also think the ranking system in Sonic Adventure 2 is a tough but rewarding ranking system. You need to not only be fast, but be good while being fast. This includes destroying enemies to build up your score or doing tricks and whatever else. It can be very difficult to get a good rank in a level, but the game at the end of the day pushes you to become better by making you utilize all of your given tools, maybe except the magic gloves, and I think this genuinely increases the fun and the gameplay and proves the point that Sonic games are meant to be replayed. Replay value is quite important to a Sonic game. But with that said, there's quite a few inconveniences that do kind of bother me with the gameplay. These are things that you get used to after playing the game for a while, but these are noticeably issues or things that you have to work around. We have to talk about the elephant in the room of Sonic Adventure 2's controls. The one button does all type of thing. If you don't know what I'm referring to the action button being the same button for spin dashing, somersaulting, the light speed dash, picking up objects, and the bounce button. There are many abilities tied to this one button which can cause quite a few issues. For example, there are times where you want to light speed dash across rings, but it can double read the input as you trying to do two things at once. This can cause you to fall off or just have it not even work at all. This is honestly just not good design when there are many buttons just begging to be used on the GameCube controller. But there is somewhat of a remedy to this issue. If you tap the Y or triangle button, you can actually change what command the action button does for things such as picking up objects or light speed dashing. As a kid, I did not know this and constantly would pet the Chow in Chow Garden when I tried to pick him up. It's mind-blowing to find that out years later, not gonna lie. But still, the GameCube and Dreamcast at the time had many other buttons that could have been used, and it feels redundant to have to do this. There isn't really much of an excuse, except I guess they wanted Adventure 2's controls to be as simple as possible. You press A and B and that's it. I don't think it's the end of the world, as I said earlier, it's just something you have to learn and get used to and work around. But it'd be much better off not doing as many things for one button. I would put the light speed dash on its own button as well as a picking up object button. I don't think it's that big of a deal knocking a few buttons off of the action button. This would also eliminate the issue of double reading actions when doing the light speed dash or anything else. I think those are some of the biggest issues with the speed character gameplay. I think something worth mentioning is the version differences. SA2 received poor treatment when it came to getting ported, just like Sonic Adventure, but not as bad. In the GameCube version of SA2, you actually have more control over Sonic's movement compared to the Steam port of the game. Even between the Dreamcast and the GameCube version, there are more than 700 plus changes. As to why, I have no idea, but the GameCube version feels noticeably better in control. Moving on from control, what about the level design that accompanies these two characters? I think the level design for the action stages are amazing. If I had to pick out the worst speed stage, it would probably have to be Final Chase in the Dark storyline. This level probably holds up the worst with its gravity mechanics. It feels very off and extremely jank, and it feels like you'll never know when you'll clip or glitch off with the gravity cylinders. We'll dive a bit more into anti-gravity mechanics a bit later, cause oh boy, do I have some choice words for that in some other levels. Something else I think is pretty worth noting is the random collision issues in the level design. Collision issues still exist in games these days, but platformers from 15 to 20 years ago, they stuck out so much more like a sore thumb. In speed stages, there could be awkward collision issues on a half pipe where Sonic will just randomly hit something invisible and lose all of his momentum. There's even some weird issues where after hitting a dash jump panel and you try to somersault, Sonic just hits an invisible wall. This makes these few sections feel like they're held by duct tape. It's not as smooth as it probably should be. I feel like if Sonic Adventure 2 had gotten a remake, a lot of these issues would be smoothed over. But guess that'll never see the light of day based off certain rumors. The speed stages I still think hold up, minus a few issues here and there. I think for newcomers these issues will be a greater challenge. But if you're looking to go back to the game, you should feel right at home in no time, with jankiness and all. I think the Sonic and Shadow stages remain some of the best parts of the game. This style of Sonic gameplay needs to return, as I feel it will and can please many fans in this fan base. But this is only 1/3 of the game. There are two other gameplay styles to analyze. We have to talk about the next gameplay style, treasure hunting. I think the treasure hunting stages here compared to Sonic Adventure 1 are nothing but improved. There aren't that many big issues with this gameplay style or levels besides that, but we'll get to that. But let's talk about how these stages have aged. So the premise of these levels are simple. Eggman tries to steal the Master Emerald, then Knuckles breaks it and it shatters in a lot of pieces that somehow fly away like the Dragon Balls. So Knuckles and Rouge collect them for their own reasons. And that's the premise of the levels. You glide around and find pieces of the Master Emerald. So how does it feel and how does it control? If I'm being quite honest, I think Knuckles and Rouge might have the best control in the game, even over Sonic. It feels like it is this way due to the level design being an open area for you to explore. Knuckles and Rouge's turn acceleration don't seem as fast as Sonic's, and it seems like you can turn more in a circle. And I really do enjoy that about the treasure hunting stages, the openness. It feels like you can get your collectathon fix here. But what can Knuckles actually do? He can do 2 punch combos, a version while you're moving and a variation where he stands still and essentially does a shoryuken into the air. He can also dig into the ground, climb on walls, and of course he has his signature flight ability, or glide. Not much about their moveset actually feels bad. The worst thing is probably the wall climbing feeling a little bit jank at times, but not Sonic 06 types of jank where you can get stuck on the walls. Other than the wall climbing, I think the controls are pretty smooth and they still hold up. Personally speaking, I don't get how people can think these levels are bad or don't hold up. I can understand it not being your cup of tea though, but these levels are very unique and comparatively offer more intricate level design compared to Sonic Adventure's counterpart. The main change and a controversial change is the Emerald Radar. In Sonic Adventure 1, the Emerald Radar showed all 3 emeralds at once, and I think due to this reason, you were able to beat Knuckle stages in sometimes 50 seconds or like a minute or a minute and a half. It made treasure hunting feel pretty shallow and easy in the first game. SA2 locks you to 1 on the radar at a time, but you can still get the other emeralds regardless. They just won't show up on the radar till you find the one that comes before it. Personally, I used to think this was dumb. Some people would say it was padding, and some would say it adds to the challenge and makes it more fun. I can see both sides of the argument, but I think the biggest factor is the RNG. Emerald locations are RNG. Sonic Team made a ton of emerald locations per level, and it really adds to the replayability to the Knuckles and Rouge stages. Till this day, I'll find a spot that I've never seen before and it actually amazes me. But this factor will likely determine your enjoyment on a particular run. There are some locations that are so incredibly vague and stupid. For example, in Death Chamber, there can be an emerald hidden in a wall, with hieroglyphics as the indicator. And specifically, there's one where it has a Chow drawing, and one of the hints tells you Dark Chow. And it's really hard to see and tell something like that. And that hint system I brought up can be incredibly helpful or unhelpful. In stages like Mad Space, it's like why even bother, as the hints show up upside down and are annoying to read. Speaking of Mad Space, it's time we talk about this. It is the absolute worst level in the entire game. Mad Space has a laundry list of terrible decisions. For one, the stage is way too big and the emerald pieces end up being way too scattered usually, and you can be in the correct area, but because the place is so big, your radar going off won't be as likely. Most people in their first playthrough will spend upward of 10 minutes or more trying to beat Mad Space. Also, the anti-gravity mechanic is the most jank in this level. When you fly down with Rouge on one of the planets, your controls will go haywire and get reversed, and it becomes very annoying to deal with. I appreciate the ideas, but the level was so poorly executed, and it makes me sad that there is something this bad in this game. Mad Space has not aged well and wasn't even liked when the game came out either. But let's talk about some good levels. First, we have Wild Canyon. It's the first Knuckles level, and it's a great start in my opinion. You start out underground in a pretty open area, then take the air tunnel, and you have a middle area, and then a left area, and then a right area. It's pretty simple. The level is kind of shaped like a giant 3D T, and it helps the player learn the verticality and horizontal movement that Knuckles can reach in a lot of these levels. I think the Knuckles stages get progressively more intricate, for instance, Aquatic Mine, probably being the most complex. Aquatic Mine has a water level mechanic where you change the water levels from 1 through 3 in order to navigate to certain areas. There's even a hidden power-up in the level that allows Knuckles to breathe underwater indefinitely. It's an extremely useful power-up for not only Aquatic Mine, but something a lot later on in the game. Some of the other power-ups you get are mandatory to progress, like the Shovel Claw and the Iron Gloves, as the Shovel Claw allows you to dig, which is needed for some levels like Death Chamber to get to certain rooms, and the Iron Gloves allow you to break iron boxes. Every character in the game gets some type of ability that allows them to do that, by the way. But other than those, there aren't aren't that many crazy power-ups for Knuckles. Anyways though, Knuckles' side of treasure hunting is pretty good. I'd say that overall, they beat out Rouge's side of things, as she mostly has the inferior stages. I don't think I enjoy a single Rouge stage more than a single Knuckles stage. Rouge's stages offer a different balance in environment detail, and as well as music choices with a more jazz-inspired theme. But the level design overall takes 2 or 3 major hits compared to Knuckles' variants. For one, Mad Space, which we already discussed, and 2, Security Hall can be one of the toughest stages because for some reason, on God's green earth, Rouge lowered her time limit from 15 minutes to 5 in the story, so you only have 5 minutes to collect all 3 Chaos Emeralds in this stage, and this stage can be a little tough to navigate vertically. The emeralds in this stage can be hidden behind these vaults that you need to unlock from the very top, and finding the emeralds in the stage can be tricky depending on your RNG. This stage can take you a long time in a different way because you restart or you run out of time. It isn't worse than Mad Space, but it certainly isn't amazing. The third one being Rouge's version of Death Chamber, which in all honesty is kind of better designed, but the flying robots that chase you down can definitely be very annoying if you do not know how to traverse the stage that well. But overall, the core level design is mostly fine for making an overall great gameplay style that I would like to see evolve in the future. Maybe making somewhat normal speed stages but made for treasure hunters and allow them to find emeralds on the way to attribute to their ranking of the stage would be a really cool idea. When it comes to the ranking system of this gameplay style, it isn't as complex as the speed stages, and it's almost entirely based off how fast you find the emerald shards, and that's the main determinant of your ranking. It makes sense for it just being that way, so no big quarrels from me on that honestly. But I think overall the music and the vibe of these stages really help sell it, and I think this aspect of the game still holds up. The mech shooting is probably the most controversial part of Sonic Adventure 2. Either people love it, feel neutral on it, or just straight up hate it. Some hate the fact that Tails is just in a mech. Some don't mind it because it's up Tails' alley being a mechanic and a genius. But we can all agree, mech or not, Tails is kind of his own man in Sonic Adventure 2 compared to anything that has come out in 2008 and onwards. But what really are the mech shooting stages about? Well, essentially they're more fully realized levels of what Gamma's shooting stages were in Sonic Adventure 1. Gamma was a bit different though than this. He was a lot faster, and his stages were mostly reused, and the gimmick was that time counted down and you gain time by shooting the enemies. But kind of like Knuckles in Sonic Adventure 1, they were extremely easy and very brief stages. In SA2 they brought back the style, but of course they axed the fishing, Amy, and the Tails race stages to narrow down to the 3 distinct gameplay styles for the sequel. It allows the levels to be more unique and fleshed out, and everyone visits mostly unique locations due to this as well. The other side of the mech stages include playable Eggman in a mainline game that had never been done before. The whole big gimmick of Sonic Adventure 2 is that you get to be the bad guys rather than just fighting them. Admittedly, the mech stages make the most sense for Eggman, as Tails was not even going to be playable originally and was a last minute decision. But in the end, I think it mostly works out. Now before we hop into the details on the gameplay, I just want to preface that I went through a cycle with this gameplay style. I didn't really think much about it as a kid. I got a little bit older, then started to dislike them. I got even older and played the game a lot more, and now I have a newfound appreciation for it, but obviously it's not perfect by any means. The mech gameplay itself is very simple and straightforward. It's mostly linear levels with many enemies and a decent amount of platforming. And of course the main gimmick is the stupidly loud shooting, and for some reason the audio balancing in Sonic Adventure 2 is pretty bad. The laser sound is so loud when you just hold it down. But yeah, the shooting gimmick is pretty similar to Gamma. You can shoot bullets and the lock-on allows you to shoot glowing missiles. But how does this gameplay style feel? Well, to be straight up honest, they're tanks. Their mechs kinda control like tanks. Terrible turn speed and acceleration. It's quite different from going at blazing speeds like Sonic and Shadow, or flying fast through the air as Knuckles and Rouge. Instead, it's a tank. But the thing is, they mostly want you to move forward in mech stages. This is because you do not control the camera that much in these stages. There are a lot of automatic camera pans, which just makes it so you can focus on moving forward and shooting everything in your path. Now the jankiest part of these stages has to be the platforming. The collision detection for landing on the platforms is very odd. You can be slightly off on a platform, and instead of sliding off you kinda just teleport off, and it's very jank. It certainly can mess you up in that game, and it doesn't quite make sense. I'd say the movement is probably the worst part about the mech stages. Of course, if you're good, you can easily traverse through these stages with techniques, but that takes a little bit of time to learn. You probably won't be backward turning around and then turning forward through a door to keep your momentum, especially on your first or second time through the game. But as for the upgrades with this gameplay style, they don't really change it up that much. The main upgrade is the hover, allowing you to make wide gap jumps or just overall slowly descending forward. It's a neat little mechanic, and it's the most fun on Eggman's stage Cosmic Wall, where the gravity is way different, allowing you to essentially fly, and it's a cool use of the hover mechanic in that stage. But the levels themselves are actually pretty well designed and thought out. They are pretty similar, built to speed stages actually. They don't have loops or as many inclines, but through mods you can actually play speed characters on these stages, and it feels pretty natural. Like I was able to beat Tails' Mission Street with Sonic. But for some, it works until, you hit a wall that only mechs can go through. But overall, it's built pretty similar. But I think the big game changer of the mech stage actually being more appreciated by me was the ranking system. You can choose to run through the stages and shoot whatever is in your face and catch that C rank, but that isn't nearly as satisfying, and actually being good at the game is pretty different. Similar to speed stages, you get rewarded on speed and of course destroying enemies, but in particular for the mechs, the more enemies you lock onto at once, the higher score you'll get. You'll see how much score you get in the top left corner, saying a lot of different things depending on the score you get. For example, it could say great or cool or sometimes perfect. Playing the stages like this added to the fun of it and made me think of the stages a bit differently as well. It felt infinitely more arcadey, and one day I was like, wow, this is actually pretty fun trying to A rank rather than just running and shooting. But not everyone is going to play it like that, and at face value it can be pretty slow and clunky, and for some an overall pace breaker. I don't think it's enough to bring this game down as a whole. The game has almost an equal amount of stages for all the gameplay styles, so it's not a werehog situation where it's super disproportionate to the boost stages. People are probably more forgiving of Eggman's side of things because Eggman obviously would not play like Sonic or even Knuckles, so it makes sense that he's in a mech. I'll say Eggman probably has the better of the two stages. They feel a bit more thought out and unique, I'll say, and some of the highlights being Cosmic Wall, Lost Colony, and Weapons Bed. I think Tails' side of things is also decent, but I feel little reason to want to return to those stages, especially Eternal Engine or Hidden Base. But Mission Street definitely slaps just for the music though. But with all this combined, I'd overall say it makes for a unique and evolved gameplay style from Sonic Adventure 1. I want to say it is the weakest, but what SA2 provides is honest variety. I've asked people what their favorite gameplay style is, and I've heard a few people actually prefer Mech Stages the most out of the rest of the game, and it all just depends on your gaming background and what you enjoyed the most. But overall, I'd still say for me, they are the roughest part of the game, but again, a unique enough standout that makes the game overall more interesting. It isn't over yet. There are a lot of other things in Sonic Adventure 2 that I think are worth talking about. There's the Chow Garden, multiplayer, and extra modes. Talking about the multiplayer real quick, the best version of it exists in Adventure 2 Battle, rather than the original version, which is missing most of the features that people like. There are a lot of unique stages in the multiplayer that is only accessible through it. For example, a snowy city escape race or the Pyramid Cave grind rail race. It has a lot of cool stuff packed into it. It doesn't hurt to mention that you can play as other characters in these modes, like Chaos, Metal Sonic, Amy, Tikal, and even two Chows. But just like the main mode, the gameplay styles are sectioned off. In action stages, it's a race to the finish, mech stages are a battle against your friend, and treasure hunting is a race to find 2 shards first. It's really unique, and I spent a lot of time playing this with my brother when I was younger. And shout out to my friend Avatar Yaya, who played this with me for this video. Check out his content in the description. Multiplayer aside, of course we have the Chow Garden, which is a mega time sink, and there's a whole Chow Garden meta and rabbit hole. I was super into it as a kid, but I didn't fully understand how much could be done with this simple seeming chow raising mechanic. But outside of those, each stage has missions outside of the main one. It can be things like collecting 100 rings, finding a lost chow, or even beating a harder version of the stage. This significantly adds replay value to SA2 like no other Sonic game before. And if you A rank all of them, you unlock a secret stage, Green Hill Zone. It's quite amazing how much they put into this game for the replay value. The fun doesn't have to end at the story. Replay value like this makes the longevity of the game a lot longer, and overall, I think it helps the game stand the test of time. The three gameplay styles all offer something unique. If you can get past the outdated mindset that Sonic games are only about going fast and holding forward, then I think this game is a rewarding game for that mindset. Sonic's friends and enemies being just as important as him and having their own way to play the game keeps the experience constantly fresh. Even at the cost of maybe some frustration with some badly aged game coding with glitches and collision detection issues, which is the major setback of SA2 in my opinion. The jankiness requires a little bit more patience than it probably once did when people like me and maybe you were kids. I originally started this video by going on and looking for big flaws in this game, and there are for sure some that I did find that I didn't already know about. But each time I turn this game on and play the game, I just love it even more, even with the flaws. Yes, I do have a nostalgic attachment to SA2, but that isn't enough to stop me from thinking critically. I have an attachment to Sonic Heroes as well, but replaying that game was strong enough to sour how I feel about that game. But the nostalgia I have for SA2 gave me great memories for sure, but the game is still exactly how I remember it. In fact, it somehow feels better than I remember it compared to something like Sonic Heroes. And the better I get at Sonic Adventure 2, and the more I learn, the more I enjoy it. And to me, it still feels like I'm unearthing that diamond that is Sonic Adventure 2. That was only one aspect of Sonic Adventure 2. But what about its story? The story of Sonic Adventure 2, I believe, has held up actually quite well. I'll say that right off the bat. Again, the overall premise of Sonic Adventure 2 was the ability to pick the hero side or the dark side, and that ties into the story, and you get to see both sides of the story. The hero side is much simpler and straight to the point of Sonic and his friends stopping the enemy, while I think the dark side of the story has the more in-depth narrative of the plot, scheme, and lore of what's going on in this story. I won't summarize this story too much, but the plot ties itself together pretty cleanly. The story starts with Dr. Eggman searching for his grandfather's, Dr. Gerald Robotnik's, lost project, Project Shadow, which Eggman lets free. Shadow causes some chaos fighting police during the night, and he steals a Chaos Emerald and the world mistakenly takes him for Sonic the Hedgehog. So this leads Sonic being chased down by Gun, which are the main enemies that both teams fight against in this game. Sonic and Shadow run into each other a few times, but overall the villains spend most of their time preparing for their plot, and the heroes play catch up to the villains and get what they need to fight them. Eventually, the villains return to the outer space research facility, the Space Colony Ark, where Eggman's grandfather once resided. This ark contains a very dark past where the tragedy of Maria happened, Dr. Eggman's cousin and Dr. Gerald Robotnik's granddaughter. Shadow's character is heavily tied to her. She was the only friend that he had on board, and eventually Gun showed up to eliminate everyone on board the ark that had ties to this project, as it was deemed too dangerous. This included Maria, and she was taken out right before Shadow's eyes. Shadow's memories were implied to be manipulated by Gerald to cut out key details of the events, so Shadow ends up being a revenge project. Eventually, the heroes make it to the Ark and they fight Team Dark individually. Tails vs. Eggman after Sonic is seemingly dead, Sonic vs. Shadow in their final showdown to stop the cannon versus Shadow preventing the cannon from being stopped, and Knuckles vs. Rouge. Only then to be surprised by the prototype Project Shadow, the Bio-Lizard, which is set to make the Ark crash into the Earth as Gerald's final revenge plot. This causes everyone to work together, in the end to stop the creature from destroying their planet. Sonic and Shadow are in their super forms and Shadow ends up sacrificing himself after realizing Maria's true message of what she wanted for the people of Earth. And with Shadow's death, I think the story closes out on a bang and we will never see Shadow again. Psych. But on a surface level, this story is very enjoyable and fun. It's pretty shonen-like and I think it holds up decently. There are some weird moments where Tails creates an emerald replica that has the same wavelength and properties as a normal one, but it's just like, okay, I guess we can do that now. Or Amy not being able to tell Sonic and Shadow apart in broad daylight. Those are very stupid moments, but they don't really ruin the story. But talking about characterization for a second, Sonic is of course himself, free-spirited, fun, and ready for the next thing at all times. Tails keeps his lessons learned from Sonic Adventure about standing up for himself and fighting on his own. He even breaks Sonic out of prison pretty much on his own, even though Amy helps a little with the key card. Knuckles was doing what he usually does, watches the Master Emerald, but it gets broken. But this time by a new and interesting character that makes Knuckles have somewhat of a love interest. Then we have the brand new characters, Shadow and Rouge. Shadow being an interesting character, as his whole character is built off carrying out revenge for himself and others in a very misguided way. Rouge is a simple jewel hunter who also doubles as a spy for the government and isn't really on Team Dark's side. And her mission was to figure out more about Project Shadow, and what better way to do that than joining them but as a spy. But Eggman in this game is not playing around. He's still his goofy self, but it's no longer a game to him. He wants what he wants this time. And in Sonic Adventure 2, it almost feels more personal because it deals with his grandfather's legacy. He threatens Amy with a gun, blows up half the moon, launches Sonic into outer space in a capsule that blows up and that makes him think he kills Sonic. Eggman was a true menace in Sonic Adventure 2, and I loved every moment of it. But in the end, when they all come together and everyone has their talks with each other, the fight is over. Eggman in this instance feels as if he grew as a character, and it almost felt like it was time for him to walk away from this.
As a child, I looked up to my grandfather because of all the great things he accomplished in his life. He was my hero, and I wanted to be a great scientist like him. But did he really mean to destroy us?
I can't see this Eggman ever fighting again after this game, and this is why I think Sonic Adventure 2 would be the perfect ending to the series. For a Sonic story in the second mainline 3D Sonic game, I'd say it's pretty amazing for what it was, and I still love the story. It may have a bit more nostalgic attachment to this side of the game more so than the gameplay, but I don't care, it still bangs till this day for me. It isn't the best video game story ever, because that would belong to something like Xenoblade for me, but it's the best Sonic story ever. I think overall Sonic Adventure 2 has enough to still hold up in 2022 and beyond. The game has so much heart put into it. Even if you don't enjoy or like the game, it should be easy to identify that. This is the game, along with Adventure 1, that allowed Sonic to truly have the room to evolve into something great. In my opinion, these games were not really followed up in the most amazing way possible, with Sonic Heroes and Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic 06 unfortunately. But overall, I think Sonic Adventure 2 has made its mark on the Sonic fanbase as a whole with its gameplay and story combined. I really think this game mostly still holds up even with a critical lens on, because it isn't perfect, but I'm confident in saying it's the best 3D Sonic game, and it's one of the best few 3D Sonic games that feel like an entire package. If you have not played this game, I suggest giving it a try, and keep everything in mind I mentioned in this video. You may not fully get where I'm coming from in this video, on either side for the positives or negatives, but that's okay. I really enjoyed creating this content piece, and I hope to do more in the future. Consider dropping that sub, and like as always, I'll see you in the next one.